Good evening, everybody. Welcome again by Mindful Elevation Caribbean discussion, where we're going to have an interesting discussion. Of course, it's all related to stress because we're opening this year. We're talking about stress. We're trying to give tips. We're trying to discuss experiences, different models, all related to stress, what we can do, how we can work on it, so we can have a happier life, so we can put the stress on the side and we can continue working on our goals and whatever we want to work on. We're going to have Mr. Chris Templeton, with whom we're going to be talking about his experiences and what are the steps that he took and what all he did to work on the stress. So, good evening, Mr. Chris. How are you doing?
I am well. Thank you, Ramonda. How are
Oh,
you? You
I
ready to have
am
some fun?
excellent. Yes, I am. I am ready to have some fun.
Me too. Me too.
So, before we start with the topic, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I think the high points are I have been in business for myself since 2003. Did a brief stint prior to that, but really in the same business since 2003. So almost 20 years. I
Yeah.
am married now for 28 years, and she was my girlfriend for 4 years before that. So actually, after tomorrow, we celebrate our 32nd year together.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
I,
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you very much. It's something I'm really proud of, and we've raised three children into adulthood, and my standard for that is they all like us and they like spending time with us. So we must have done something right. And
Definitely.
we have really fabulous friends, and we feel very, very blessed. Which isn't to say it's all been the easiest ride all the way along, because it hasn't. But those
Mhm.
are kind of the high points for me in terms of who I am and where I come from.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. That's
Hmm.
indeed a lot of years of marriage. Congratulations again.
Yeah, I still really like her too, and I think she still likes me, which is, of course, hard for me to understand. But I don't, I'm not, but we have a really, really, really good time together. Thoroughly
Nice,
enjoy our
nice.
company.
Yes, liking each other is a very important thing when you have a relationship or marriage. So, yes.
Yeah, and it takes work, and the work's worth it. So, yeah.
Yeah, most definitely. So, tonight is all stress related. So, can you indicate to us what your stress situation might have been or still is?
Yeah. Oh, ooh, good question. Yeah. Well, let's see. The things that come to mind for me, I don't think I've recognized my stress in a lot of ways, but I've always had kind of this unquenchable desire to understand why I behave the way I do and why other people behave the way they do. And I think what probably where my stress came out the most was one, raising our oldest daughter, who was from my wife's previous marriage and who was somebody that just did everything the hard way. And she'll tell you that as a 36-year-old that, that's who she is. And and now she can do it with a smile. But when she was, a teenager, it was tough, tough, tough. I mean, we really had to work and stay focused on what was important in terms of where we wanted her to be. But there
Mhm.
were some rough, rough times. And then I think the other place that I was stressed was with work. I started a online marketing and web development firm in 2003 and immediately got a huge case. Like I think the first year was probably $500,000 with a brand that everybody would recognize called EpiPen. The auto injectors for when you get a bee sting, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so we had to bring in a lot of people, almost all as independent contractors, and manage that process. And that was not easy. And I had, I didn't have high standards in terms of the best programmers and the best designers, but I had very high standards about what was acceptable behavior in our business. If you weren't a part of the team, I was going to do everything I could to try and get you to be a part of the team. And if that didn't work, and this was part of the talk that we had with people, everybody we hired, if you're not a fit, I'm going to talk to you about it. We're going to try and figure out why. And if that doesn't work, we're going to let you go just as quickly as we can, because we want a group of people that really thrive being together. And that's a lot. So at that time, that was 2003, and as she loves to call herself, and I still love. She said, my evil stepmother said to me, who's not evil at all, "Hey, I read this book called The Power of Now. You should read it." And it was all about, if you're not familiar with it or your audience isn't, it's all about all the things that we do that create stress and anxiety in our lives, and how we do it to ourselves. And it just hit me like a ton of bricks. So that was kind of the backstory in terms of kind of where I was raising. I think Sarah at that time was probably about 15ish, and I was brand new in this business, and it was a lot. So reading that book really, it really surprised me, because one of the things he says very early on is, we are all of us, universally really good at driving ourselves crazy in certain parts of our lives. And to think that I had a role in what I thought was all this stuff going on out there, and looking at it and saying, oh my gosh, I have a role in how I'm coloring that, whether I'm putting on rose-colored sunglasses or the dark shades that make everything look awful. Recognizing that I was doing that was a game changer. Like, as it took me a long time to really kind of get myself to a place where I could even understand that. So,
Yeah.
but it made a big difference.
Okay. Yeah, because I was indeed going to ask you, because you said that at one point you read the book. Did you come to that realization one time, or did it still take you some time to assimilate? And yeah.
Well, let me see if I can answer it this way. I'm still assimilating. I think one of the things that I've recognized, and that has had a huge impact in terms of my stress, is that there's always going to be a part of me that's out to keep me safe. And the way that it does that is by looking at what I'm thinking and looking at the situation around me, and pointing out all the potential problems, which is where I think the vast majority of stress comes from.
Yeah.
And leaving it at that. Like, that part of us, what Eckhart Tolle in The Power of Now calls it the pain body, which I absolutely hate that name, because it makes it so awful and icky. When you recognize that there's this piece of us that takes a bad situation and just perseverates on it and makes it worse. And I mean, we all do that. And I do it far less than I used to, but that piece is never going away. It's always going to be there. And for me, in terms of creating some relief from that, is just recognizing that part of me is there. It's watching out for me. It's really good at finding the problems, and super, super crappy at solving them.
Yeah. Before you read the book, and what were kind of like the symptoms that you were feeling? Now, of course, it's after a few times, or after a few years, I mean, you might be able to say what were your, let me call it, your symptoms. But at that time, what were your symptoms that now you can say, okay, those can fall in the stress category?
Well, I think primarily fear, right? How am I going to do? How are we going to raise this daughter who's just defiant up one side and down another? And feeling powerlessness, like, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this. Like, my wife Betsy and I talk about this all the time. Our greatest accomplishment is Sarah. And she'll tell you, I was no fun to raise. I know that. And so that was super hard. And, I think a lot of times, like, I don't think that I necessarily defined it as stress, but
Mhm.
it was fear. It was feeling helpless to do anything. And all those things I think fall under the broader scope of stress and anxiety. And
Yeah.
so, and then in the business, just, being in a situation where very quickly you have 15 people to manage and a client to make happy. Most of these people that worked with us were contractors and vendors, and managing them and how they interacted with the client. All of those things were stressful. Just
Mhm.
and how it presented itself was mostly feelings of, oh my God, how am I going to deal with what Jimmy just did, telling my client that he distinctly told her not to do something in an email. Oh my God, that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
I don't think that I necessarily defined it as stress, which probably is helpful.
Hmm.
But it was definitely stressful. I mean, those kinds of things. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Yes, it does. It does.
Good.
And then, how did you start working on it once you realize that you have to be aware of what is going on in your life?
I think at the time, and I think I think our daughter taught us this kind of by default. Like, she spent 2 weeks with us, 2 weeks with her dad and stepmom, 2 weeks back with us, 2 weeks with her dad and stepmom. And, the behavior that she had, she became very good at pitting us against them parent wise. And what I always said to Betsy was, we have to always be thinking about what we want long term. One of the things that I think is a huge misconception about The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle's book, is he talks about the power of being in the now. And I think a lot of people look at that and say, okay, well, here I am. I'm in this moment. I'm present. And I'm thinking, you better be thinking about what it is that you want to accomplish. What he points out is we have a tendency to take the stories of our past and our fears of the future and use those as stressors, which
Hmm.
is true. But for me, when we were raising Sarah, really focusing on, I better manage my behavior based on what we're trying to accomplish, which is a happy adult that's productive, raising happy kids, which she's doing. I mean,
Hmm.
and so I think that was the primary thing, and then that was also the same with business. I never, no, not never. I almost never got into confrontations with other vendors or that sort of thing. But the reason that I didn't was I was always, okay, this person, the way they're behaving does not work for me. Handling it on the phone with a bunch of other people on a conference call is not the way to do it. I'll deal with this, and giving myself some space to do that.
Hmm.
The other thing that I would say made a huge difference, and I'm just going to pull it up real quick, is in the late 80s, I read a book called The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. And he has a quote in there that has really become the foundation of when I talk about what I do and this model that I've developed. Um, is this, and it's between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and freedom. And
Yeah.
that one really got me. And that was in the mid 80s. And so, now looking at it, stimulus, my daughter's behaving badly. Response, if I'm living by default, I'm yelling and screaming, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
Hmm.
but if I'm playing the long game, well, wait a minute. What is it that I want? for Sarah to be and do and have. So that also helped. And I think that then adding the power of now and this concept of the pain body, of this protective part of us, and having an awareness of that really, really helped a lot.
Yeah. It's indeed often is how we responding on whatever is going on at that time. If we going to respond without taking a minute, or are we going to take a little bit in time and see exactly what the situation is, and if it's worth it to just blur things out of react one time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And let's be clear, this responding immediately is almost never ever a good thing, is it?
Correct. Yes. Yes. There's always regret afterwards, and then you still have to go and amend and fix. So yes, it's best to take a minute or two and then respond. So we're so calmer than you would have done it at the beginning. Yeah.
I'm convinced that without the practices that we'll talk about, I would be in a much unhappier place. And I'm not unhappy. I'm really quite pleased and happy with life overall. So,
Yeah. Yeah. At one point, you came up with a model. What's the reason actually that you decided to come up with a model and to be able to share it with others as well?
well, as far as the model goes, first it started out with just 3 questions, and I never intended to be sitting here today in 2003 trying to share this with the world, because I hadn't gotten that far with it. But I did come up with 3 questions, and Eckhart Tolle really was responsible for the first one, which was, what's the story I'm telling? If what I do is I define my thinking, what I'm visualizing in my head about myself, about the world around me, if what I'm doing is defining that as story, the really wonderful thing is that I automatically know that it's also editable, that I can change it. And just like you said, if you behave badly with somebody, then you got to go clean it up. Well, thankfully, if I look at my behavior as a story, whether I use it as a way to prevent me from behaving badly, or I have to go clean something up after the case, after it's happened, looking at my thinking as a story is really a great way to get that initial space between stimulus and response. Instead of just responding, now I'm saying, hey, wait a minute, what's the story I'm telling in this moment?
Yeah. Okay.
So the
So,
second, go ahead, sorry.
no, no, no. I was going to ask you. So, what's the second question? Now you're making me curious.
The second question is this story serving me in this moment, in this moment, in this moment, in this moment? Like I may have had strategies that as a kid or in college or now in terms of things like politics, I may have had things and ways of behaving that were absolutely appropriate yesterday, a month ago, a decade ago, when I was a kid. Totally appropriate. The question is it appropriate right now? And so much of what we do is we just, this is stimulus and when there's no space, we're just running scripts, right? Oh,
Mhm.
there's a situation that reminds me of my parents yelling at me and telling me that I'm just milking them for their money. Here's my automatic reply. Oh, yeah. Right. Well, that doesn't serve anybody. It certainly doesn't serve me. So the second question is it serving me? And the other thing that I think is really important to keep in mind is I'm also, we'll get to it later, but right now in question 2, I'm not asking how I feel. Critically important, because so much of what happens with us is we're like, he just did that and I am mad as hell and I'm not going to take it. Okay, let me know how that works out for you. Versus, you know what, I really am cranky about this, but is it going to serve me now, long game wise? Is it going to serve me? Is it serving me? And when I can simply look at just that piece, right? Is this
Mhm.
serving me right now? More space, more ability to respond in a way that does serve me. So that's the second question.
Mhm. And I like that question actually because indeed, and the example that you gave with that question, because how indeed most of the time how we reacting now has some base from what happened in the past. So instead of looking at a situation how it is now, we relate it one time to whatever happened in the past and then go and react based on that, forgetting that things might have changed. There are other things related to the situation happening now. So I indeed it's a very important question to ask. Indeed.
And to me, of the three questions, I think that one is the most important one because it's really easy to answer. Like I know in my heart if my behavior is serving me or not. I may not like that I know that it's not serving me, and that's a whole different issue. But just having that simple question, and if my response is, "What do you mean is this serving me?" Guess what? It's not,
Yeah.
right? And but if it is, our response is so different. Like, that's not serving me. Like there's introspection. There's this place that we answer the question from, regardless of whether it's serving us or not. When we recognize authentically whether something is serving us, we really do know. We really know in our heart of hearts whether something is serving us. And so, and if we think it's serving us, and we're saying, well, I'm a victim of this, I'm filled with fear, and this is how I handle things. Yeah, not so much. It's not
Yeah.
really going to serve you in the long run. And
Correct.
so that's one of the beauties of that question, is that it is
Mhm.
binary. There's just two ways. Either it is or it isn't.
Yeah. And then you, if like you said, you react the same way, you keep on getting the same result as well. So you would want to
What?
be having things differently, but then you keep on reacting the same way.
Well, and that's part of it, right? It's, this is so much about self-awareness and self-leadership, self-mastery. Like, how do I really, really get to a place authentically where I have more meaning and more purpose in my life? And those sound like really tall orders, and I really don't think they are. I think once we realize what's kind of preventing us from, or what's causing us to have feelings of, you know, being stressed out, what's the meaning and purpose of my life? When that second question really, as the saying goes in the United States, separates the wheat from the chaff. Like when I get all the covering off the wheat, man, there's some really good kernels of truth there that I have available to myself. One of the things that's
Mhm.
so important to me about this is that, my goal is for anybody to take these questions in the model that we'll show in a little bit and be able to use them on their own. You don't need me. You don't need, I mean, you may need a coach, you may need a therapist to work through some of the tougher issues. But with this, we're really exposing this inner wisdom that we have by asking that question. Like, once I recognize that I'm not serving myself with my story and my behavior, I get more
Mhm.
space to figure stuff out.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Third,
nice.
third question, is there a more authentic story I can tell? And that's really where we start to take, that recognition of where we are in any given moment and then turn it into something actionable. Like, how can I be more authentic to myself? And if I can be more authentic to myself, I'm going to have less stress because I'm taking whatever it was that was those stressors and dealing with them authentically. Yeah, I'm really bugged about how I have to deal with employees or contractors that behave badly, but I also know that if I just respond badly, that's not going to serve me, and certainly not in the long game. And if
Mhm.
I recognize from a more authentic place how to deal with this in a way that serves me, serves the person that I'm working with. The guy that said to my client, I distinctly told you not to do something. I let him go. Let there be no doubt about it. But
Mhm.
I did it in a way where he was absolutely clear why. It was written from a place that was centered and grounded, not, gee, Jimmy, you really blew that one. It wasn't confrontational. It wasn't judgmental. It was more of a fact based piece, and
Mhm.
that I delivered to him, and then we had a conversation following that. So
Mhm.
when I'm doing that from an authentic place, lots of space between stimulus and response,
Mhm.
and we still have to deal with tough stuff, but we get to do it in a way that serves everybody.
Yeah, correct. I can imagine that if you didn't go through question one and two, that by this third question, it would be indeed very difficult to go and realize or go and think how differently you can do things. But then,
Yeah, yeah, I think you're right. Sorry, go ahead.
no, no, go.
I think you're right, and I mean, at some point, one of the things that I hope your audience will take away more than anything, more than the questions, more than the model that we'll show you, is please, from right this moment, focus on your life as practice. Give yourself that space to say, you know what? I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to make things, and when I make them, I'm going to learn from them. That's all authentic storytelling. And at some point, with the three questions, they get condensed down into, oh, nope, that's not serving me. And immediately moving to, how can I do this more authentically? But
Mhm.
in terms of the beginning parts of this practice, having access to those three questions is really critical. And you're right, without the first and the second one, without some self-awareness of what's the story I'm telling, and additional self-awareness of, is this serving me in this moment, the more authentic story isn't going to be nearly as good as
Mhm.
without those as it is with those questions.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, correct. And it's a practicing too. It might not go the way you wanted the first time, but as long as you start with question one and then you practice and yeah, like you said, create a space. That's important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really the
Mhm.
key. What I'd like to do is show you the beginnings of the model, if you don't mind. And I'm going
Yes.
to show, I'm going to show if this works. So here are the three questions. What's the story I'm telling at the top? Question two, does it serve me in this moment? And is there a more authentic story? So at question two, like I said earlier, it's binary. There's either a yes or a no answer. And so what I say is, if you're, sorry, trying to see where I'm at.
Mhm.
If the story I'm telling isn't serving me in this moment, I call that little or lesser me. And we all have a part of us where we just know who we are when we're in little me land. And
Okay.
so recognizing that I go up there on a regular basis, that's part of who I am, is
Mhm.
really, really important. If I answer the second question, does this serve me in the moment? Then I say I'm in authentic me land, so to speak.
Mhm.
And then what I do is there's another part of us that's kind of an extension of our authentic selves. And that's what I call, and I add a line and I call that enlightened me. And so what this is, people who are familiar with the concept of flow happens right in here. And typically where we want to be in life is here and not up here. But what's really important to note is that you are always, always going to be up here on occasion. The question is, how severe am I up here? Am I in rage up here, or am I just angry? Or can I get below the line and be at frustration, but also moving forward? Makes sense.
Yes, yes, it does make
So
sense.
go ahead.
No, no, I was just saying that it makes sense.
Excellent. So this is where we then go ahead and begin to add emotion. On the right side of the model is positive emotion. On the left side is negative emotion. And when you think about it, when we are in little me land, our range of emotion is
Mm-hmm.
so much stronger. Like I said up here is rage. This might be I'm manic, like manic depressive,
Mm-hmm.
and so what happens is we still have negative emotion here, and we still have positive emotion here, but its strength is much reduced from when I'm above the line in little me land.
Yeah. Okay.
So so that's kind of the basics of the model, and
Mm-hmm.
that's how I've helped myself to understand what's involved and where I am to create that self-awareness, so that and as I create more awareness, I become a better leader of myself, and I become a better leader of my kids. I become a better partner to my wife. I become a better boss at work, and I become a better employee to bosses as well. I
Mm-hmm.
become a better vendor to my clients, that sort of thing. Because when I'm down below that line in authentic me land, I'm taking the time to not be in a default state of living. And the
Yeah.
other thing that's really fascinating is up above the line is all fear based. Everything that happens up above that line is based on fear.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And that's where anxiety and stress comes from. It's where we feel powerless, where we feel like a victim. And the opposite of that, down below the line, I love this. It's one of my favorite things. One of the ways to look at the opposite of curiosity, of fear, is curiosity. When I come below that line into authentic me land, I'm
Mm-hmm.
way more interested in understanding, getting a better perspective, looking at different perspectives, different people's perspectives. And when I'm doing that, life's just a whole lot better.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Then the first thought that comes in my mind when you say that, it is then like you are kind of like a child. You're curious to find out things that's going on, how you can learn new things, how you can do things. So yes, we didn't have no fear when
And
we were born.
isn't that a beautiful place to be? Like, we talk a lot about the inner child. We hear a lot of people talk about your inner child and that sort of thing. And frankly, when you think about a baby, that baby goes between authentic me, enlightened me, and little me. Like when he's hungry or he needs a diaper change, man, are you going to hear about it as a parent?
Yeah.
Aren't you? So
Mm-hmm.
they're
Correct.
floating above, but they do have that curiosity, that excitement, and that all happens below the line of that main line of is this story serving me?
Mm-hmm.
And when you start to recognize, and some people are going to say, man, I do not want to be childlike. Fine, that's okay. Still, you can be below the line, and there are all kinds of personality drivers that'll drive how that's defined for you and how
Mm-hmm.
you behave from an authentic place, because everybody doesn't. I mean, I'm way more happy-go-lucky. There are people that are going to be much more reserved in how they approach life, but that doesn't mean that they're not being authentic to themselves.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then let's say when you using those three questions and or the model, are there, is it kind of like that you're staying on almost like one line, one level, or do you have moments that you kind of like going back up and down?
Always have the ability to go back up and down, don't we? This is the model, the colored version of the model. And so your question is really good. Sometimes I'm up here. I may wake up
Mm-hmm.
and be stressed out. This morning I woke up. I had to do a 2-hour workshop with people
Mm-hmm.
about this, and I woke up right about here. And I was like, "Oh my God, I've got to do that. I need to get myself in the right place. I need to spend a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of time writing about what the long game, how I want this to go."
Yeah.
Um, and so then I come down, and then I might go up because, oh, I've got to deal with making sure that I can present this the way that I am right now. And then it all works. I'm like, yeah, I think I'm good to go. And then when I get over and actually start presenting, or like I am now, like I'm right here right
Mm-hmm.
now. I may even be down here. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So recognizing that we go up and down through this model all the time, and that it is natural. Like, I don't want anybody to ever walk away and say, you know what, I just want to take this part and make it go away. It's
Mm-hmm.
never ever going to happen. You're always going to spend time up there. But as I said earlier, hopefully what's happening is when I go up here, I'm not going very high up, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
spending more of my time here. And also, when I'm spending more time down here, I tend to recognize when I'm getting down here. There are all kinds of times where we are bypassing moments of enlightenment because we've been told by our little self that enlightenment's a state that you get to and then you never leave it. Oh my God,
Yeah.
such
Mm-hmm.
garbage. But when I spend more time in an authentic place, I tend to be way more open to holding my wife's hand while we're watching a movie and going, man, this is good. Or being in a car together and just going on a trip, or watching my daughter, who was so hard to raise, raising such lovely kids now and being
Mm-hmm.
in such a good place about it. Like, all of that is meaning. And we just, when we're up high, it's going right by us and we're not recognizing it.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's why we have a tendency to kind of stay above the line, because we're not authentic enough to recognize, life's rich tapestry of good and bad. It's not all good, is it? Not gonna
Yeah. Correct.
not getting
Yeah.
to world peace tomorrow, are we?
No.
So
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, no, that's it's interesting, and especially that the how you connecting the three questions, and the most important thing actually is that, like you say, you're not staying below the line all the time, and it depends on which day you having that you're going up and down, but it's how you are able to create the space and recognize it one time that you are there, and what you can do to go back in the middle space.
It's all practice. Like,
Yes.
when I go, okay, this is practice. And that's really what's so important to me about this model, is it gives me a way to practice on my own. It gives me a way to look at my behavior when I go see my coach or go see a therapist, if that's what I need. It gives me a way to self-identify and create much greater self-awareness about where I am in any given moment.
Yeah. That's the beauty of it.
So, one of the things that the one last concept, well, no, that's not true. The next concept I'd like to share with you is, you know, what Eckhart Tolle called the pain body, and we
Mhm.
typically call the ego. And we say things
Mhm.
like, "Oh, the ego is the enemy," and you've got to crush the ego to be happy and to be enlightened. Um, I want to dispel those myths, because that is absolutely untrue. Ego's not going away. We are hardwired with fight, flight, freeze response. It's why we're on the planet today. And now that part of us, that wiring, has a whole lot less to do, because there aren't lions and
Mhm.
tigers and bears to take care of. So it's that part of us is always looking to find problems. And what I call that is the protector, which is this little guy up here. When we're authentic, in authentic me mode, it's the narrator, but when we move north, that's the protector. And I want you and your audience to make a commitment to yourself that you're going to partner with the protector, and that you're going to recognize who the protector is, why he's there, that he or she is really there to help you so that you are safe. The thing to keep in mind, and this is really where our life's work is, like what every coach, what every therapist, what everybody who's in the helping professions in terms of people and interpersonal, what they're all trying to do is to help you to get below the line. They don't know that because they haven't met me yet, but but when I recognize that I am hardwired with this little protector who's there to keep me safe, really good at finding all the problems, it's really good at taking a problem and making it way, way worse. When I recognize that that part of me is always going to be there, and then I give it the attention that it wants and that it deserves and that it's earned, which is to say, hey, what are you thinking about, dude? Right? Like, what's going on? And so one of the reasons I was so excited to be on your podcast is because what I think people don't recognize is, I would guess somewhere between 80 and 90% of our stress is this little guy busy worrying about all the problems that we have, most of which never come true, right? We've all heard,
Yes.
oh my God, how many things have we worried about that just didn't need to be worried about? But when
Correct.
we recognize that that guy is here to help us, and we partner with him instead of try to push him away. And really, the funny thing is, he's the one that's trying to push all of that stuff away. The protector wants to identify the problems and then, oh, we'll deal with that later. Let's not think about that. That's all little me thinking, all from the protector. And so what I want to help people to do with this model is recognize that when you listen to the protector, what he has to say, he mellows out. And it's like, think about all the flights around the globe, I'm sure, that are being canceled in the United States. Big storms, thousands and thousands of flights being canceled a day. Can you imagine being the counter agent at an airport where an angry customer whose flight just got canceled comes marching up, and they are going to read you the riot act? They're going to tell you everything that's wrong with your airlines, that you counter agent, you're a bad person, and you shouldn't be working for and the counter agent goes like this. And they listen. They don't respond in kind ever, unless they're really crappy counter agents.
Yeah.
And at some point, that big ball of angst and stress and frustration, as the customer is letting it out, it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And then it's getting closer to the line. And then at some point, they're like, have I just been really letting loose on you like that? Like, they get that sheepish little smile. And that is when the counter agent says, okay, let's see what we can do to help you out. Right.
Yeah.
And we need to do that for ourselves, with ourselves, and let that guy have, as you know, one of the things I think is so important is journaling, where, you can write from the protector's perspective, and he's swearing at you, saying things you wouldn't let anybody else say to you. And when you write that stuff down as it's coming, he goes away. And what happens, he doesn't go away, but he mellows out. And what happens is we go from here, where it's a big issue, to here, down to here, and to here. And finally, we might even make it over here. And this is why I say it's all practice. But when we recognize that there is that aspect of us that keeps us in little me land, and that we have the ability to change his story by listening, and then, hey, we're gonna deal with the issues that you've brought up. Oh,
Yeah.
what a better life we're opening ourselves up to.
Yeah. it's it's really interesting because every time indeed it coming back that putting the effort and the time in yourself, seeing where you are, in which position you are, and what you can do to alleviate the stress, or bring some more peace to yourself, and for the way that you're reacting as well to the things that are around you. So,
Exactly. And so having that last little piece of, and just the other thing that just really quickly comes up is that when I start moving toward kind of this enlightened area, this is where on the outside of us can be whatever works for you, God, infinite intelligence, the universe. As I start to move south in this model,
mm-hmm.
I expose myself to far more of that infinite intelligence that helps me to deal with what I'm dealing with moment to moment, and get to a place where I'm more likely to serve myself and be in that authentic place that is where we all want to be anyway.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. It's not an easy task, especially because if you're so accustomed with stressing out about everything, or having all kind of things running through your mind, it's indeed not easy 1 2 3. But yes, with practice and trying every single day again, especially for yourself, not for anybody else, yes, it will be really rewarding.
I want everybody to be authentically selfish. Like
Yes.
when I'm really authentically caring for myself, and I recognize that I'm going to have bad days, I'm going to have good days, and moment to moment things can change. And I recognize that it's that little guy, little gal up there that's yapping in my ear, and
Mhm.
that I have the ability to talk that part of us down. Oh my, oh, how things change. And you know what's really cool? My wife is one tough gal, and she
Mhm.
can get negative pretty fast. And we still can't quite put a date on it, but about 4 or 5 years ago, she just started living in a place of appreciation. Like she still can get pretty cranky, and she can still tell you why so and so is a nightmare to work with, or whatever the case may be. But what has been so amazing is that when I authentically take care of myself, there's it's like a magnet. If I'm down here or over here, it's like this magnet that attracts people down below the line. And
Yeah.
so then, because we have that self leadership, we influence people in ways that serve them. And
Mm-hmm.
I was telling a very good friend, we have a group of about 20 friends that our kids all went to school together, and we go camping a lot and that sort of thing. And I was describing the model, and she goes, "Oh my God, when we're together, we're all together. We're all in authentic me land, aren't we?" Yeah. And it's a good place to be, isn't it, Gina? And she's like, "Oh, that's a great place to be."
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We all need to put, like you said, a little bit more self care for ourselves, and be the authentic self. And yes,
Now,
not be.
remember, the protector's happy to say, "Oh no, you shouldn't be selfish because it sees it from its perspective above the line,"
Mm-hmm.
and where the selfishness we're talking about is that selfishness below the line, where I'm taking care of my whole self to the best of my ability, practicing and getting better at it, and now I'm a whole lot more fun to be with. I'm better at helping people to be accountable from a place where I'm not confrontational. I mean, my whole demeanor changes when I'm below that line in authentic me land.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's really beautiful. So, Mr. Chris, you have any tips or advice for our audience?
Yeah. We've already talked about practice. Please consider your life practice and keep practicing. Don't ever stop. There'll be days when you practice less or not at all, and that's completely fine. Don't Please don't just try to be positive, because that's little me protector at work. So all you got to do is be really positive, and then the minute things don't go right, wham, we go right back over to the negative side. Try to be authentic in your thinking. And then the other thing that I think is so important to practice is appreciation. And I differentiate that from gratitude, because gratitude's a wonderful, wonderful thing for things that you're truly thankful for. But I need a practice that helps me deal with my daughter being difficult, my employees, having an employee that's having a tough go with a client. I need to be able to appreciate where they are. And the beauty of this model is, once I apply it to myself, I can appreciate without condoning where other people are, especially when they're in little me land. And then I know that my goal for myself and for the people that I'm with is to help them to get below that line. And that happens with appreciation. There's way too many things that gratitude just doesn't present itself as a good option for. But when I look at appreciating and say, oh, I can see that that guy's in little me land, and there but for the grace of God go I, and I can behave in ways where that person is going to feel like they're not going to be judged by me, that they're going to be listened to, that I'm going to be curious with them. Oh my God, changes everything. So
Yeah.
appreciation, practice appreciation as regularly as you possibly can.
Yes. Thank you very much, Chris. It was really very informative. And I hope that our audience taking away what you have been sharing with us. And I would really like to thank you for your time. And so, viewers, so if you have any questions for Chris, you can always send them any remarks, anything, and then we will send it through to him, and then he can react on them. If they would like to contact you, where would they be able to do that?
There's two places to do it. On Facebook, which you should, people, your audience will have my link, I think, in to my profile in Facebook. Also, ohthestorieswetell.com, ohthestorieswetell.com. Contact form there. Feel free to contact me that way. And what I'd really love is, I think this is universal. If you or somebody in your audience thinks that some of this is garbage or doesn't make sense, I would really love to hear that. Like, I'd love to hear what they're struggling with, because it helps me to make the model even better. And then the last place is YouTube. If you go to YouTube and you search for "Oh, the Stories We Tell," what'll happen is this little icon will come up, and that's my channel. Please do me the favor of subscribing to my channel so that I can get a vanity URL. Right now, it's some garbage URL after YouTube, and I want it to be "Oh, the Stories We Tell." And then go look at the Honesty Project, which is a playlist of a very dear friend of mine who I told about the model about 7 or 8 years ago. And she came to me a couple of years ago and said, you know what I'd really like to do? I'd like to tell you about issues that I struggle with, and let's apply them to the model. It's fabulous. Coworkers that are annoying, dealing with relationships. So it's a nice way to see the model put to practice. So those are the ways to get a hold of me.
Nice, nice. Thank you. So tonight we have been talking with Mr. Chris about being your authentic self, about to realize in where you are standing at the moment, how you can create the space to be your authentic self, and to take some care of yourself as well. And he was also indicating that keep on practicing to reach at that space where you can be your authentic self. So, Mr. Chris, thank you again. I
Thank you so
appreciate
much for
it.
having me. I totally appreciate it.
You're most welcome. And viewers, thank you as well for being present with us. And then we will see you next time again. Enjoy the rest